There is a woman standing in front of her bathroom mirror at 5 in the morning, before the world wakes up, before the noise of the day arrives. She leans close to the glass, looks into her own eyes, and whispers something so quiet that even she can barely hear it. 60 seconds. That is all it takes. And yet something inside her begins to shift, like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface of the earth, silent but undeniable. She does not know it yet, but this single minute will become the hinge on which the rest of her day, her week, her entire life will turn. This is not magic in the way fairy tales describe it. This is something far older, far more reliable. Louise Hay spent her life teaching that the words a person whispers to themselves become the architecture of their reality. Not the words they shout to others, not the words they post for the world to see, but the secret ones, the ones spoken only to the self in the stillness of a private moment. These are the words that build or destroy a life from the inside out. What if there was one phrase, just one, that could be whispered for 60 seconds and begin to dissolve years of fear, scarcity, and self-doubt? What if your subconscious mind has been waiting this entire time for permission to change, and that permission comes not through effort or struggle, but through a whisper? Somewhere right now, someone is doubting that anything this simple could work. That doubt is exactly the same doubt Louise Hay encountered in thousands of people before their lives transformed. Stay with this. Watch what unfolds. Because in the next few minutes, you will receive the exact phrase, the exact method, and the exact reason why whispering rather than speaking aloud activates something different in the mind. By the end of this video, the only question left will be why no one whispered this secret to you sooner. Louise Hay did not become one of the most beloved teachers of self-healing because she had an easy life. She endured a childhood marked by abuse, poverty, and abandonment, and later faced a diagnosis that would have broken most people's spirit entirely. Instead, she turned inward. She discovered that the conversation she had with herself, hour after hour, day after day, was either keeping her trapped in suffering or was slowly, gently, setting her free. From that discovery, an entire philosophy of healing was born, one that has since touched millions of lives across the world. At the center of her work sits one simple but radical idea: thoughts repeated often enough become beliefs, and beliefs shape every experience a person will ever have. The mind does not distinguish between a thought spoken in anger and a thought whispered in love unless a person consciously redirects it. Most people spend their entire lives unconsciously repeating phrases of fear, of unworthiness, of not enough. Louise Hay's gift was teaching people how to interrupt that pattern, and to do so not through years of therapy alone, but through something deceptively simple, the spoken affirmation, repeated with intention. Why whispering, specifically? Because whispering bypasses the part of the mind that performs for others. When a person whispers, there is no audience, no need to sound confident, no social mask required. The whisper speaks directly to the subconscious, the same part of the mind that absorbed every belief a person has ever carried since childhood. It is intimate. It is private. And because of that privacy, it is believed. This video will walk through a single phrase, one that Louise Hay herself returned to again and again in her own life and in her teachings to others. It will explain the science-aligned psychology behind why 60 seconds of whispered repetition can begin to alter neural pathways, shift emotional states, and open the door to new circumstances. Across 7 chapters, this exploration will cover where the phrase comes from, how to use it correctly, what changes to expect, and how to sustain the transformation once it begins. This is not a promise of instant miracles. It is an invitation to test something ancient and proven, something that costs nothing but 60 seconds and a willingness to believe, even briefly, that change is possible. Stay through to the end, because the final chapter reveals what tends to happen in the days following this practice, and it surprises almost everyone who tries it. Louise Hay often said that the most powerful work happens not in grand declarations but in quiet, repeated moments of self-talk that nobody else ever hears. The phrase at the heart of this practice emerged from her decades of work with mirror affirmations, a method she pioneered long before it became popular in modern self-help circles. She discovered that people who whispered affirmations to themselves in the mirror experienced a different quality of belief than those who simply thought the words silently. The whisper, she found, occupies a unique middle ground between silent thought and spoken declaration, making it feel both real and safe at the same time. This particular phrase was something she returned to during her own most difficult periods, including the years she worked to heal her body and her self-image simultaneously. The words are simple: I am worthy of love, health, and abundance, and I welcome them now. On the surface, it reads like a basic affirmation, but its construction follows Louise Hay's exact formula of stating worthiness, naming desired outcomes, and anchoring them in present tense welcome. She taught that the subconscious mind cannot process future tense well, it needs the present moment to feel believable, which is why the phrase ends with now rather than soon or someday. Many of her students reported that whispering this exact phrase for even a single minute brought tears, unexpected calm, or a sudden lightness they could not initially explain. Understanding where the phrase comes from matters because it carries the weight of decades of tested practice, not a trend invented for a single video. 60 seconds may sound insignificant, but neuroscience-aligned research on repetition and self-talk suggests that focused, repeated phrases can begin altering neural firing patterns within minutes. Louise Hay never used clinical language, but her intuitive understanding mirrored what is now studied as neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself through repeated input. A whispered phrase repeated continuously for 1 minute typically gets said between 10 and 20 times, depending on pace, which is enough repetition to begin forming a new neural groove. The brain's reticular activating system, the part responsible for filtering what gets noticed in daily life, becomes more attuned to evidence supporting the whispered phrase once it has been repeated with feeling. This means that after whispering, I am worthy of love, health, and abundance, a person often begins unconsciously noticing opportunities and signs aligned with that statement throughout their day. The brevity of the practice is intentional. Louise Hay believed that consistency over time mattered more than duration in any single session. 1 minute is short enough that almost no one can claim they do not have time for it, removing the most common excuse people use to avoid self-healing practices. The emotional charge behind the words matters more than the literal 60 seconds. A whisper said with genuine feeling for 30 seconds outweighs a mechanical recitation for 5 minutes. This is why the setting matters too. A quiet, private moment allows the emotional charge to build rather than dissipate amid distraction. 60 seconds, repeated daily, compounds over weeks into hundreds of repetitions, slowly but steadily reshaping the internal dialogue a person carries. The first step is finding true privacy, even if that means stepping into a bathroom, a car, or a quiet corner of a home for just 1 minute. Louise Hay recommended facing a mirror whenever possible, because eye contact with one's own reflection intensifies the emotional impact of the words. The whisper should be soft, almost breathy, barely audible even to oneself, as this register tends to bypass the analytical, critical mind. Before beginning, take 3 slow breaths, allowing the shoulders to drop and the jaw to unclench, since tension in the body mutes the emotional resonance of the words. Begin whispering the phrase slowly: I am worthy of love, health, and abundance, and I welcome them now, pausing slightly between each phrase rather than rushing through it. As the minute continues, notice any resistance that arises, whether it is a flicker of doubt, a memory, or a physical sensation, and continue whispering through it rather than stopping. Louise Hay taught that resistance arising during affirmation work is often a sign that the old belief is being challenged and is beginning to loosen its grip. Some people find it helpful to place a hand over the heart while whispering, as touch combined with words deepens the felt sense of safety and self-compassion. Repeat the phrase continuously for the full 60 seconds, using a phone timer if needed so the mind does not have to keep track of time, which would pull focus away from the words. When the minute ends, sit in silence for a few seconds afterward, allowing whatever shifted internally to settle before moving on with the day. In the first 1 to 3 days of this practice, many people report a noticeable change in their internal tone, describing it as a quieter inner critic. Some notice an unexpected emotional release, including unprompted tears, which Louise Hay considered a healthy sign of stored emotion finally moving through the body. Others report a subtle but distinct increase in eye contact and confidence during ordinary conversations, as though something in their posture has shifted. Sleep quality is one of the most frequently mentioned changes, with many describing falling asleep with less racing, anxious thought after just a few days of practice. A common early experience is heightened awareness of negative self-talk happening outside the practice, almost as if the whispered phrase trained the mind to catch its own old patterns. Some people notice small external shifts too, such as an unexpected compliment, a small windfall, or an old contact reaching out, which Louise Hay attributed to the law of resonance. Skeptics often report the most surprising results, since they expect nothing and are caught off guard by even minor emotional or circumstantial shifts. It is common for the practice to feel awkward or even silly during the first day or two, and Louise Hay considered this discomfort a normal and temporary part of breaking old patterns. By day 3 or 4, many practitioners describe the whisper beginning to feel less like a performance and more like a genuine, comforting ritual. These early signs are not the end goal but markers that the subconscious mind has begun receiving and integrating the new message. Each part of the phrase was chosen with intention. The word worthy directly confronts one of the most common root wounds Louise Hay encountered in her work, the belief of being fundamentally undeserving. Love, health, and abundance represent the three pillars Louise Hay most often addressed in her teachings, since she believed most suffering traces back to a lack in one of these three areas. The word welcome was chosen instead of deserve or demand, because welcoming implies open receiving rather than striving or forcing, which Louise Hay believed blocked the very things people sought. Ending the phrase with now anchors the statement firmly in the present, refusing to let the mind push the desired outcome into an indefinite, unreachable future. Louise Hay often explained that affirmations are not about lying to oneself but about practicing a truth that has not yet been fully believed or experienced. The repetition of the phrase is, in effect, a gentle argument with the subconscious mind, presenting new evidence until the old belief can no longer hold its position unchallenged. Many of her students found that this particular phrase helped most with feelings of unworthiness tied to childhood experiences, since it speaks directly to the inner child's need for reassurance. The phrase does not specify exact circumstances, allowing the subconscious mind the flexibility to bring love, health, and abundance in whatever form serves the highest good. This open-ended quality is intentional, since rigid, overly specific affirmations can sometimes create resistance by limiting the ways the universe, or the mind, can respond. Understanding the meaning behind each word transforms the whisper from a rote exercise into a deeply personal act of self-restoration. The most common mistake is rushing through the 60 seconds without genuine emotional engagement, turning the practice into empty noise rather than meaningful repetition. Another frequent error is practicing inconsistently, doing it once with enthusiasm and then abandoning it after a few days when results are not immediately dramatic. Some people whisper the phrase while simultaneously holding a skeptical, arguing internal dialogue, which dilutes the emotional charge needed for the words to take root. Practicing in a noisy or distracted environment significantly weakens the effect, since the nervous system needs a sense of safety to fully absorb the new message. Skipping the eye contact with the mirror, when possible, removes one of the most powerful elements of the original method that Louise Hay considered essential. Trying to force an emotional reaction, rather than allowing whatever arises naturally, can create additional tension rather than the intended release. Some people change the wording of the phrase too frequently, never allowing one version long enough to settle deeply before switching to something new. Judging the practice too quickly, expecting overnight transformation, often leads people to quit right before the subtle shifts described in Chapter 4 would have appeared. Practicing only during moments of crisis rather than consistently during calm periods misses the compounding benefit Louise Hay emphasized throughout her teaching. The simplest correction to nearly every mistake is returning to slowness, privacy, and genuine feeling, the three pillars that make this whisper effective in the first place. Louise Hay always emphasized that affirmation work is not a one-time fix but a lifelong relationship with one's own inner voice. After the first week, many practitioners choose to extend their whisper practice to 2 or 3 minutes, though the original 60-second version remains powerful on its own. Pairing the whispered phrase with a consistent time of day, such as right after waking or just before sleep, helps anchor it as an automatic ritual rather than an effortful task. Some people begin journaling brief notes after their practice, recording any shifts in mood, circumstance, or insight, which reinforces the subconscious connection between the whisper and visible change. Louise Hay encouraged revisiting the same phrase for weeks or even months at a time, allowing it to fully integrate before introducing new affirmations. As old wounds begin to heal, some practitioners notice the original phrase naturally evolving in their mind, taking on slightly different, more personal wording, which she considered a sign of authentic internalization. Sharing this practice with others, without pressure, simply by modeling consistency, often becomes a quiet way of inspiring change in the people closest to a practitioner. Long-term practitioners frequently describe a cumulative effect, where the whispered minute becomes the calmest, most grounding part of their entire day. Over months, many report not just emotional shifts but tangible life changes, including improved relationships, unexpected opportunities, and a renewed sense of physical well-being. The sustained practice ultimately becomes less about reciting words and more about rebuilding a relationship of trust and tenderness with oneself. There is something profoundly humble about a practice this small carrying this much weight. 60 seconds. A whisper. A mirror, or simply closed eyes in a quiet room. No expensive program, no complicated ritual, no permission needed from anyone else. Just the willingness to speak gently to the self the way one might speak to a frightened child who has waited a lifetime to hear something kind. Louise Hay built an entire body of work on the belief that healing does not require grand gestures, only consistent, loving attention turned inward. The phrase shared in this video, "I am worthy of love, health, and abundance, and I welcome them now," carries within it decades of tested wisdom, distilled into a single breath of words. What happens after speaking it is rarely instant fireworks. It is something quieter, slower, and ultimately more lasting, a shift in the internal climate that eventually reshapes the external weather of a life. The invitation now is simple. Find one private minute today. Lean toward a mirror if one is nearby, or simply close the eyes. Whisper the phrase, slowly, sincerely, for 60 seconds, and then let go of any expectation of how it should feel. Notice what arises in the hours and days that follow, the small shifts, the unexpected calm, the flicker of self-respect returning where doubt once lived. This is the quiet beginning Louise Hay spent her life teaching others to trust. The whisper has been spoken. What happens next is simply life responding in kind.